little adjustment. Everybody see okay enough to write? Alrighty then. Not enough time to cover all of art history, so let's go run through the art museum. Oh, we need to get out the scissors. It's scissor time. All right. Cut the top outer corners off of everything for Unit 1. We are finished with Unit 1. I have graded your sketchbooks. Cut off the corner, and when you leave today, throw away your triangles. Yeah, cut the corner off. Yeah, at a diagonal. And that makes it easy for me to flip to Unit 2. Everybody, I want you to save a page for your Unit 2 title page. I don't have it ready to teach you guys how to do the Unit 2 title page, but save the page for Unit 2. Then go to the next empty page. And at the top, write Chapter 24, or you can write 24. Or you can write Baroque, B-A-R-O-Q-U-E. Then go to your table of contents and write this page number next to Chapter 24 in your table of contents. Are we ready? So the art of the Baroque begins somewhere around 1600. And the big push with Baroque art is to engage and emphasize engagement with the viewer, to engage with the viewer. It emphasizes theatricality. What does theatricality mean? Yes, right. He said dramatic, yes. Like the theater. You go to a theater to watch a play. So now we're going to look at artwork that has a lot of elements of the theater in it. Has anybody ever watched a play? All right, do the actors talk normally? No, it's weird. Like you have to, you spend like the first 5 minutes just getting used to how they speak so you can understand. Is the lighting normal in a play? No, it's dramatic. Do people stand normally in a play? No. So we're going to begin to see art that borrows from the theater to make their artwork more exciting. And drama will engage with us physically and emotionally and spiritually. That's the big difference between Renaissance and Baroque. I'll show you some other differences. But remember how Baroque was always so neatly organized, especially with those triangular compositions. Think of Leonardo's Last Supper. Christ is in the middle as a triangle, and then an even number on the left, even number on the right, groups of threes, an even number of windows in the back that's all balanced. Think of the School of Athens. We have those two figures in the center, a group of figures to the left, a group of figures to the right. We're looking straight down the middle of a barrel vault. Everything's nice and orderly and composed on both sides. Are we done with this slide? Does anybody need more time? All right. So let me introduce you to the Council of Trent. Write that term down, Council of Trent. I should put that in green. The Catholic Church determined during the Council of Trent, the Catholic Church determined their response to the Reformation. So after the Council of Trent, there was a new clarity in art. And they decided to make the message of art much more direct, making the message much more accessible to people. Pope Paul III is the Pope who commissioned Michelangelo to finish the Sistine Chapel. Remember the Last Judgment? He assembled the Council of Trent to discuss what to do about the Protestant Reformation. And it was a series of meetings in northern Italian town of Trent. And church officials addressed concerns brought up by Martin Luther. So here we begin the Counter-Reformation. It's the Catholic Reformation. So Luther began a movement away from the church. Now the church begins a movement to counter that. So this is the Catholic response to the Reformation. So if we look at these two pictures tell the same story. Christ on the cross. Look at how the Renaissance artist did it, and look at how the Baroque artist did it. What is the difference? Yes. Do you remember the terms that I gave you of stoic and dynamic? All right. So I want you to know those terms. Stoic means very still and boring, and dynamic means full of action. So the intent of Italian Baroque art was to restore Roman Catholicism. So here are some of the characteristics of the Counter-Reformation, was that artists tried to reach audiences in new and dramatic ways. And during the Council of Trent, they affirmed powers of art to instruct Christians. And once again, this is the Catholic Church's response to the Reformation. Now, if we look at Masaccio's Holy Trinity, come on, work. I need new batteries. All right. So it is if you have a vertical line going down the middle here, it is the same on both sides. So if we can take a line down the middle, Jesus and God, it's the same on both sides. We have a person standing to the left, we have a person standing to the right, equally distant. We have a person kneeling over here and a person kneeling over here. And then the architecture is the same on both sides. Here, the main axis, if this was an axis down here, the main axis goes diagonally in the Rubens painting. And then also, look at the lighting. We'll talk about lighting soon, but this is a good example of the difference of lighting with Renaissance and Baroque. What kind of lighting do we have over here on the Renaissance side? Brighter. Yeah, it's brighter, and it's like lit all over. And to me, this is like they're in a room like this where it has fluorescent lights all on. There's no real light source. With the Baroque painting, where's the light source coming from? Yes, the sun. You can, yes, and then what direction is it coming from? To the right. From the right. Here's another example of how the Renaissance artist and the Baroque artist look different. And the Renaissance painting, you can have an imaginary line going right down the middle, and you have like a curve over on the left and a curve over on the right. You have a group of people on the left, a group of people on the right. And in the windows in the background, there's three that are equally spaced. It's a well-ordered composition. But if you look at the Baroque composition, again, we have that strong diagonal line. All the figures are on the right side. It is asymmetrical. I just talked about the bright light source and the definite light source coming from the side. And then here's another comparison that I like to show. On the left, the Renaissance painting. What are these red things that are on top of these pillars? What's the red things? What is that? There's these that the red stuff is fire. All right? Do you see it? Now, is that fire giving off any light at all? No. It's like the fire is not doing what fire does, which is glow. But on the right, where's the light source? It's the candle. Is that candle giving off the light? Yeah. So the Baroque artist figured out how to do dramatic lighting, whereas the Renaissance artist, they saw the fire, they just painted fire. It's almost like the difference between children making art and professionals making art. It's what I see between these. Here's another example of the dramaticness. Both of these tell the exact same story. It's the adoration of Jesus. Which one is more exciting? Yeah, absolutely. Look at the lighting. I joke about that one because where's the light source coming from? Yeah, we got a nuclear baby right there. All right. So the baby is glowing and lighting up the room. Whereas on the left side, it's like they're in a room like this with all fluorescent lights. Or the other way that I describe this kind of lighting on the left, the Renaissance lighting, is a cloudy day where the light just comes from all over the sky. So these are the main differences. I got another pair of differences where we have idealism versus realism. The Baroque artists try to get, try to get even more real. Look at the fruit in the basket. Is the fruit perfect? Are the leaves perfect? Right? So they see the imperfections of the food and they paint the imperfections. On the left, are there any, I dare say, imperfections? Well, the proportions are way off. But are there any imperfections in the skin? All right. Are they, it's idealized. The little baby looks like a little tiny man. All right. And that's because Jesus was meant to be seen as wise, and older people are wise where babies are not wise. So they often portrayed him as a miniature man. But she is seen as perfect without any blemishes. And the Baroques will go hardcore on the blemishes. Do you remember in the Roman art where we looked at the sculptures of the Republic, and how they were imperfect, or they showed things as they were. They were not idealized. And then here is another part of Baroque art is, what is this a painting of? What is the subject? So Baroque art becomes more complicated. It's not so easy to tell what is going on. All right. My guess is that this would be the adoration of the Magi or a Madonna and Child. But who are all these extra people and what are they doing? What's going on? There's a lot of activity that is superfluous in the story. And that's for our visual entertainment. It makes it more interesting to look at and try to figure out what is going on. And the Baroque artists are looking at the Mannerists, how they have these overly posed figures. And if we compare the two, by the way, this is a painting of the Holy Family, the one on the right, the Baroque on the right. So with the Renaissance, we still have these triangular compositions in Baroque art, but it's much more complicated, and the triangle does not quite reinforce the main subject. We have additional figures spilling in from the doorway in the upper right that have nothing to do with the actual biblical narrative that this is trying to illustrate. And there's a Sibyl in the lower left, which is a reference to other texts and stories apart from the main narrative. So there's just a lot of extra stuff going on with Baroque art. And like I said, this is a perfect example. Both of these tell the same story. The one on the left is very easy to identify and understand. The one on the right is overly complicated. So we're going to start today with sculpture. And we are going to, I believe, Rome. Maybe I should put that in there. And our first artist is Bernini. Are we good? Bernini, Bernini. All right, I got a story time for you. So we are on Mount Olympus. Olympus is the place where the gods all live, and we have Eros and Apollo. Do you know another name for Eros? That's right, it's Cupid. All right, so Cupid has his bow and arrow, and what happens if he shoots you? This is a perfect time to be talking about it. We're in February, so what time does what happens if Eros shoots you with an arrow? You fall in love with whom? First person you see. That is correct. All right. So Apollo walks by Eros. And remember, Apollo is one of the main gods. He is the god of the sun. He's the god of music. And he gets in his chariot, his sun chariot, and rides it across the sky every day. And that's what gives us the sun going from east to west. So your science teachers are going to try to tell you that it's because of the rotation of the earth and business like that. And that is a filthy lie. Anyways, Apollo is walking past Eros and he says something rude. He gives, play with your toys, little boy. He dismisses him. And that angers Eros. And he basically says to himself, I'll show you what my toys can do. So he shoots an arrow and hits Apollo in the back. And so then, therefore, Apollo falls in love with Daphne. All right. And he is absolutely smitten. Right there, see all the hearts? Then he shoots an arrow made of lead and it hits Daphne. The arrow made of lead causes you to not love the person you see, but hate and be repulsed and be afraid of the first person you see. And so Daphne is now terrified of Apollo. She finds him to be grotesque and hideous. And so she runs from him. Now, Daphne is a water nymph, and because she is immortal, she's very fast. But because he is a major god, he is also very fast. He's a little bit faster than her. And she gets away for a while, but eventually he catches up. So she calls out to her father, the river god, and asks him for help. Her father, the river god, helps her by turning her into a tree. So then there is Apollo. Whoops, I need to fix those. Yeah, I need to fix the. All right, those are backwards. All right. So there is Apollo standing there with this tree, totally in love with the tree. And what he does is he takes some of the branches from the tree and he fashions himself a wreath to go around his head. So listen to this from Ovid's Metamorphosis. Apollo loved her still. He placed his hand where he had hoped and felt the heart still beating under the bark, and he embraced the branches as if they were still as if they still were limbs, and kissed the wood, and the wood shrank from his kisses. And the god exclaimed, "Since you can never be my bride, my tree at least you shall be. Let the laurel adorn henceforth my hair, my lyre, my quiver. Let Roman victors in the long procession wear laurel wreaths for triumph and ovation. Beside Augustus's portals, let the laurel guard and watch over the oak. And as my head is always youthful, let the laurels always be green and shining." So he wears laurels in his hair. And that is why Roman senators and you see Roman orators, they would wear the laurels in their hair. And that is why Victory puts a wreath of laurel over the victor's head as a sign of victory. That all comes from this story. So that's where the tradition of the laurel wreaths come from. I told you that story to show you this sculpture right here of Apollo and Daphne by Bernini. This is the moment of the story where he is, excuse me, just about to catch her. And she has just asked her father to help her. And she is in the middle of transforming into a tree. If a Renaissance artist had done this, it would either be before the action happened or after the action happened. But in Baroque art, they wanted to choose the most dramatic moment of the story to illustrate. You can see the bark going up around her body. She is turning into a tree. Look at the fabric coming off of his back and the big swoop that it makes, the big curve that it makes. By the way, this sculpture was meant to be exhibited against the wall. You're not meant to view this angle. But still, the author or the artist sculpted all of this. You get a close up of his face, a close up of her. Look at the smoothness of the skin and look at the texture of the hair. This is supreme craftsmanship by the artist. And then you can see that her fingertips are turning into leaves and branches and twigs. I am absolutely amazed at the delicacy of these little leaves because remember what I said about these sculptures, that as you carve them, the smaller, thinner parts break off very easy. I cannot imagine how he did this with tools and the leaves did not break off. These tiny little twigs did not break off. All right, it must be tools other than hammers and chisels. It could be files that he used to make these small little delicate parts. Her feet are growing roots and growing into the ground. And then I want to show you the difference in texture of the bark and her skin, and the nice flowing rhythm that is in the fabric. And look at the explosion of hair that is flipping around. This is really showing so much movement and energy. And so we can see, again, to compare between the Renaissance and the Baroque, that the Renaissance tends to show things before or after the action, and the Baroque, now we will definitely get into the middle of the action. With the Pietà, we had this nice triangular composition, but now we're having these really lovely swooping and curved composition. This is more typical of Baroque art. All right, I've got another story for you. Demeter and Persephone are mother and daughter. Demeter is the goddess of the harvest, I believe, and her daughter is Persephone. Both of them are immortals, and everybody loves Demeter. She is a very pleasant goddess, and when she's happy, everybody the crops grow and everybody gets fed. And Demeter is responsible for all of agriculture, and people worship her to grow good crops. And everybody loves Persephone. She's so beautiful and she's so pleasant to be around. And everybody has a crush on her. Meanwhile, down in Hades, Hades is the underworld. It's so depressing in Hades. Everybody's dead and moaning, and there's nothing to do, and it's all dark and depressing, and how dreadful. And that's where Hades, the god, lives. Remember, he is the brother of Zeus and Poseidon. So Hades dreads the monotonous tasks of managing the other underworld, and he is away from Mount Olympus, where all the other gods are having fun. So he doesn't live on Mount Olympus. He lives down in Hades. So he doesn't get to attend the parties and the weddings and the, and to converse with other gods. So he's quite bored down in the underworld. So one day, Persephone is hanging out in the field with a nymph friend, and Hades sees her from below, and he falls in love. And he crashes up through the ground and grabs her and takes her back down to the underworld. And she is not happy to be there. She doesn't want to be there. She wants to be back up above. Remember, it's depressing down there. It's a lot of moaning and sadness. And so she doesn't want to be there. She is being held there against her will. While she is down there, her mother is quite upset because she and her mother are best friends, and they hang out all the time. So her mother doesn't have her best friend, her daughter. And so her mother becomes very sad, and the crops start dying. And when the crops start dying, they can't grow food. And when you can't grow food, then you have a famine. So we have a full-blown famine going on the earth. And people are, so there's a problem with this for the gods, because if people can't eat, then they die. And if they die, they can't worship the gods. And gods really like it when people worship them. So if there's nobody to worship the gods, then we got to have a problem. So all the gods talk Zeus into talking with his brother. And Zeus and Hades work out a situation where Hades allows Persephone to go back up to the world for 6 months out of the year. And during those 6 months, she hangs out with her mother Demeter, and everything comes back to life. The flowers start growing again, the grass grows again. And then after that 6 months is over, she comes back down into Hades, and then her mother is sad and depressed. So that's when we have the crops die, the grasses die, the trees, the leaves fall off, and it gets very cold and nothing really grows. So that's what gives us the seasons, right? So your science teacher is going to try to tell you that the seasons are caused by the rotation of the earth around the sun and the tilt of the axis, and that is a filthy lie. All right, so that brings us to this sculpture right here, the Rape of Persephone. Now, I want to remind you of the term rape. We're going down to the third definition of rape, where it is an act of robbing or despoiling or carrying away a person by force. So this is the moment where Hades comes up from the underworld and grabs Persephone and carries her back down into the underworld. This sculpture shows conflicting desires, a conflicting movement, and conflicting emotions. This sculpture was made from one solid block of Carrara marble, which is like the highest quality marble that there is. And the sculpture was originally meant to be seen from the front, but it is sculpted all the way around. And in this sculpture, we have this two axes. One axis goes from his right foot up to her head, and then his head down to the Cerberus and her leg down there. So it creates this interesting composition. And notice how she is pushing him away. She has her hand against his forehead, trying to get away from him. And we have really quite wonderful curls in his beard. And my favorite part of this sculpture is how soft the stone looks. You can see the pressure of his hand on her thigh, and you can see how the thigh gives into his hand. And you see it from another angle. It really does look quite soft. That is an incredible skill that he shows. And then down below, we have Cerberus, all right, the three-headed dog. And that is basically there just to support the sculpture up above. It is a quite heavy sculpture, and the having all that weight on these two thin ankles would definitely break after a while. So the fabric and the dog help to support the weight of the sculpture. And we can have, it really is quite detailed. And look at the shiny smoothness of the sculpture and the details in the toes. All right, we're going to go to Rome now, the Cornaro Chapel. And in the Cornaro Chapel, look how extravagant it is on the inside. This is a Baroque church, and notice how different it is from the early churches that were so plain on the inside, the ones that really enjoyed iconoclasm. All right, so we're going to go to the left area over here, and here is where our next artwork is. It is the Ecstasy of St. Teresa. So our sculpture is down here at the bottom, but this whole thing is the work of Bernini. You know, all of this. And if we go to our next page, we get a close up of the Ecstasy of St. Teresa right here. And then if we take away all the background stuff, we get a little bit better view of this. So this also tells a story. So Teresa would feel these sharp pains, and she would have these dreams of this angel thrusting an arrow into her. And she wrote about it. So she wrote, beside me on the left appeared an angel in bodily form. He was not tall, but short and very beautiful. And his face was so aflame that he appeared to be one of the highest rank of angels, who seemed to be all on fire. In his hands I saw a great golden spear, and at the iron tip there appeared to be a point of fire. He plunged into my heart several times so that it penetrated my entrails. When he pulled it out, I felt that he took them with it and left me utterly consumed by the great love of God. The pain was so severe that it made me utter several moans. The sweetness caused by this intense pain is so extreme that one cannot possibly wish it to cease, nor is one's soul content without anything but God. This is not a physical, but a spiritual pain, though the body has some share in it, even a considerable one. So she is experiencing both pleasure and pain at the same time. All right. So, and then I also want to point out, this is when I talk about the Baroque art being theatrical, this is a perfect example of this. This is not just a sculpture, but the whole theater around the sculpture. So there is a lot of theatrical elements involved in this artwork. He uses theater tricks in the sculpture to exaggerate the drama, and it's meant to engage the viewer. And he's trying to recreate the spiritual experience to increase devotion and piety. So behind this sculpture, there's these golden rods coming down, and then there's a shaft that goes up, and there's a window. So the sunlight comes in, shines on these golden rods, and provides light for the sculpture. And then here you can see on the back, that's where the light is coming from. Then there is a window above that. And we have this sky painted up there. And then we have this, there's the Holy Spirit, but they have these clouds that are sculpted in there. So the sculpted clouds blend into the sky. So sculpture and painting become one. And then on the sides, we have an audience. Like they have an audience with a play in the theater. So now we have an audience. So he has sculpted these figures right here and, whoops, right over here. All right. He sculpted these figures. And then one of the figures is the cardinal, is the Venetian cardinal. And then up above, we have a broken pediment, which is a part of that. But here's a perfect example of using the theater in artworks. I went to a funeral recently, and they had a broken pediment up there. And so I was sitting there and thinking about the ecstasy of St. Teresa. And then I found this online. I thought this was hilarious. Is that not the same face? Anyways, are there any questions? All right, that'll finish us for part one, neatly packaged within one class period. All right.